Good evening, dear audience of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada. On behalf of the Institute, I welcome all of you to the first episode of a series of webinars that we have planned on the eve of Peacedays Festival 2023, organized by Rotary Club of Winnipeg. This is an important event, and we all gather in this particular week to work together for world peace. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Reuben Garang, which I'm going to introduce a little later. And before we embark into our session today, let me do the treaty recognition. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homelands of Métis Nation. We all are promise bound to work together in the true spirit of truth and reconciliation. Dear audience, as I was alluding to, that this particular session is one of the episodes that is being aired today, and we'll have more 6 episodes coming up in this particular week. And why and what is Peace Days? Let me give you an idea just to set the context of our today's session. Peace Days is a space that has been created to promote and inspire understanding, goodwill, and compassion locally, nationally, and internationally. It supports and motivates people who want a culture of peace and compassion. It encourages conversations and relationships that will inspire action, commitment, and the promotion of positive peace and peace literacy. Peace Days was inspired by Rotary World Peace Partners in 2003, envisaging the idea of a Canadian Museum for Human Rights as a beacon of hope for the oppressed, impoverished, and vulnerable peoples of the world. Peace Days grew out of a desire to celebrate the United Nations International Day of Peace. As in years past, Peace Days has brought together a number of committed venue participants like ours, Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, who are doing their part to raise awareness and make a commitment to act all in the name of promoting positive peace. And each year, the International Day of Democracy is observed around the world on 15th September. The United Nations General Assembly has declared this as a day to review the state of democracy in the world. Democracy is as much a process as a goal, and only with the full participation of and support by the international community, national governing bodies, and civil society and individuals can let the ideal democracy be made into a reality that to enjoyed by everyone, everywhere. Dear audience, we are joined here by 2 of our esteemed advisors, David G. Newman from Rotary Club of Winnipeg, and our friend of Rotary and advisor to CRIC, Mr. Gary Sant. Thank you so much, David and Gary, for joining us this evening. Dear audience, let me have the privilege to introduce our speaker today, who has taken all the trouble to prepare an elaborate presentation to inspire us with regards to the question of Sudan and how positive peace can impact people's lives. Mr. Reuben Garang is the Director of Immigration Partnership Winnipeg, also known as IPW. Reuben previously worked for the Government of Manitoba as a policy analyst and community outreach advisor. Reuben helped establish the Ethnocultural Council of Manitoba, ECCM, which serves as a shared space where diverse ethnic communities come together to provide an empowering platform and collective voice with equal representation for immigrants and refugees working to make Manitoba a welcoming and inclusive province. Reuben worked in different capacities for decades as a community campaigner. Reuben holds a Bachelor of Science and Master degrees in Development Practice from the University of Winnipeg. He is recipient of Mayoral Volunteer Award in 2015. Reuben, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming in. So the audience, today our mode of operation would be, first we'll listen to Mr. Reuben's presentation, where he's going to talk about highlights of the two distinctive peace building plans, the Education Pathways to Peace and Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan, also known as CASS. So that is his title of the talk, and he has prepared a presentation which he's going to share with us. So, and later on, we'll engage in a dialogue, and through our esteemed advisors and myself, we would get into discussions about his presentation and the situation in South Sudan. Thank you once again, dear audience. Please remain with us for next 40 or 45 minutes. Reuben, the floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you to those who have tuned in to come and listen to my presentations or discussion in relation to what is happening in my home country of South Sudan. I'm going to be sharing slides, and I'm going to be speaking briefly about the two initiatives that I have been involved for quite a number of time. And I might not concentrate really on slides because these are things that are really, that I'm passionate about. This is also something that always remind me about my own journey as a young person who left South Sudan as a teen, more than 30 years ago. And so I could go, over the slides and share a story about my own feelings and what I see, what I want to do in my country. So briefly, I am going to be highlighting two peace building initiatives, Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan, which is the group that I and few others formed a couple of years ago, and then also the Education Pathway to Peace. Next. So here is going to be the, the outlines of our presentations. I'm going to be doing introductions and of these two initiatives, and then I'll talk about why I involved in this initiative and the sort of achievement and the challenges and what to come. And then I will end it with appreciation to people who have supported me on this. So Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan, CAS, was established in 2014. Those who might have followed South Sudan situation, we had, a war that erupted in 2013. This is just only 2 years after we gained our independence in 2011. So 2013 war erupted, and by the time that war erupted, I was actually planning to go back to South Sudan. After I finished my first degree here, I thought I should go back to South Sudan to rebury my parents because it was been a long time for me to go back home. But when I arrived in East Africa, especially in Uganda, the war erupted in my country. So I couldn't go to South Sudan, but I ended up meeting a lot of people who were displaced and people who ran away from South Sudan at the border in the northern part of Uganda. And so when I came back, I came back with heavy heart. I saw what happened firsthand. I heard the news. And so I came here and I was shocked and didn't know what to do. So in conversation with few people, we ended up establishing the Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan. And with the goal of, help to ending the war in the country. And with the goal also to help support humanitarian aid to reach places where people are affected and in need. And then also to establish an accountable institutions and governments for all the people of South Sudan. And then also to support trauma healing and reconciliations among the people. All those efforts were aimed to really achieve a durable peace in South Sudan. Next. So why the coalition of advocates for South Sudan? Like I said earlier, when you are affected by a situation, like in my case, when I was, praying, wanted to go home, wanted to go to my village, I didn't say it earlier, but I left my country in 1987 as a young person, and I was part of the group that was later known here in North America as the Lost Boys of Sudan. But when I left, I was actually a teen. When we were in Ethiopia, we were called the unaccompanied minors. And so I was affected by the war, but when I came to Canada here, I had opportunity to go to school and finish my degree while I was also raising my family and supporting my community here. But I thought that I would go back home and, immerse myself in the sense of what home was before I left. And then also to rebury my parent, because my parent died after I left because of the war. So I didn't have that closure. I thought I would have that closure if I were to go home. But unfortunately, the war erupted and then also quickly took a tribal overturn. And so people were killing themselves, same people of the same country, people who have suffered for a long, long time, start killing themselves. And that resulted in us really wanted to do something that will engage people, a place for people to come, not just only to agree, but to shout out and hear out their grievances, but also to be reminded about the importance of being one people. That all of us in South Sudan, regardless of where we come from, we are all victims of the war. But this violence that erupted in 2013 defeated our people, so people killed themselves. So if I come from a certain tribe, people from the other ethnic group might not be happy with me because of my ethnicity. And so that's the reality of the war that has just erupted and people start killing themselves. I'm hearing people saying that they're not hearing me. David, are you hearing me? Okay. So yeah,
Okay.
so the coalition was established as a tool to engage people to overcome, the impact of the war. It was also a non-partisan platform that welcome all people regardless of their political or ethnic affiliations. Next. So what did we achieve, for the last few years? I wanted to say this upfront. To be engaged in advocacy is very difficult, always very difficult to know exactly what you have achieved, because it is you are advocating for changes to happen. And it's not only you who is doing that. There are so many other people that are doing the same things. And so it is a collective effort. And so sometimes there's nothing specific that you could say, I change this, but if there are changes that happen, you would always be also thinking and look back on what you have done and then say that I have contributed into that changes. So after the war in 2015, we actually organized a conference in the US, in the United States, and Des Moines, Iowa. I think that's where we organized it. And a lot of people by that time, really South Sudanese, were really burning inside. And so they wanted, when they hear that people were going for a conference where people were going to talk about the conflict, people came to vent their anger. People come to let other people know that there are other problems. People came to hear what other political leaders are saying. So there's a lot of people who came to that conference with different needs, and some wanting to fight, things like that. And we had over 700 people. But we managed to facilitate discussions. We allow people to talk. We allow people to say why they are not happy. We allowed people to cry. But at the end, in that conference, we were able to actually, agree on something. And the question that we posed to ourselves was, what kind of South Sudan do we all want to see, regardless of the impact of the war? We ended up coming up with a vision that is now the vision of the Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan. We also have written, and then year after year, from 2015 to 2018, we have been organizing conferences, and where we call all the community leaders to come, and political leaders representing different parties, State Department, governments and NGOs, people from the region of Africa, people who are working to support peace in South Sudan. We also have written position papers on issues. We challenge some of the actors. We confronted them sometimes. Sometimes they're not happy with us, but we balance. We're not, we're not supporters of the government. We're not supporters of the opposition. We criticize when we think that we need to criticize. We organize meetings with church groups, with humanitarian bodies. We also work closely with South Sudanese ethnic leaders under their community associations. Next. So this is just when I was thinking of coming to talk here. Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan has now only a Facebook page which is active. So I just went there and took some of the posters that we did last time. So this one is one of the posters where we invited quite a number of South Sudanese ethnic leaders, South Sudanese in the United States, in Canada, representing their communities and challenging them to come to talk on how do we work together to really promote peace among the parties. And so it was a very successful event. If people wanted to watch that video, it is still on the Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan Facebook page. Next. Yeah, this is also another example. Those bishops are the top leaders in South Sudan. And we were able also to bring them to come and talk about the importance of implementing the peace agreement processes, especially establishing the government of transitional national unity. So we work closely with people. These bishops represent different denominations, and they are among the top leaders in the country. Next. Challenges related to this work. Like I said earlier, communities, when there's war, people suffer. And it's the reality. It's the reality. People are killed. People, families, properties are destroyed by the people that they know, by the people from their own countries. And so it's difficult sometimes to trust who. So as the leader of the Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan, when I in my process of engaging with the leaders, some of them have not seen me before. I haven't met them. I will just find their phone numbers, call them, and say we want to do this. My last name is stand out. Is Reuben Garang. Garang is a name for a particular community. It's a Dinka community or a Jing community as that name. And so when people hear the name from other ethnic groups that who are affected by the war, some of them think that because my ethnic group is the largest ethnic group, is one of the dominant groups in South Sudan, people will think that I am there as an agent of the government. They will not really wanted to talk to me, or if they wanted to talk to me, they will throw so many bad words, to my community or to myself to discourage me engaging with them. So it wasn't that very easy, and I could see why they were doing that, because they were affected by the conflict in the country. This work also is done voluntarily. And when you do something voluntarily for 8 years, something the big, people in my community uh, think that we are there as a tool to make changes. But also, it's very difficult to find volunteers for that long time. For 8 years to do something that sometimes involved people moving from Canada to United States for 2 or 3 days to do conference and to organize all these conferences. Not very easy, or to work with people to bring people together. It's not that easy. So it's one of the challenges, and of course we don't have funding, and this work is also not safe. If you're coming from a war-torn country and you talk about the war situations, people in power will not always wanted to be friend with you. And also when communities are divided, sometimes when you point out something to that the opposition done wrong, they'll think that you are an agent of the government. And if you point something out that the government has done wrong, then they'll think that you are an agent of the opposition. And so it's not safe, you know. Uh, um, as this as I speak now, we're pondering on the future of the coalition of advocates for South Sudan. But when we look back for the last 8 years, we think that we have contributed into the, the it's not a permanent peace, but now there is a hope for a better South Sudan because of the peace that has been achieved. So I'm gonna continue to talk about the other initiative, and then people could ask me questions later on. So the sorry, I don't wanna. Okay. The other initiative stem out from the Coalition of Advocates for South Sudan, Education Pathway to Peace. It aims on building peace through youth education, fostering mutual understanding among the divided communities, and empower and give hope to mothers, grandmothers who are taking care of families and other children whose parents are not there because of the war. It is also a way of encouraging people to live together. Next. So the history of it. I went back to Uganda after I came back. Like I mentioned earlier, that I went in 2013 to northern Uganda, where I met some of my relatives that I haven't met, for over how many decades. I met them there at the refugee camp. So I went back there to those refugee camp because I have seen when I was there are a lot of challenges, especially in relation to access to education. But also people were living in a very small place, concentrated camps, and all of them come from different ethnic groups and also carry with them the impact of the war to the refugee camps. So I went there, visited those camps, and I decided when I was going there to go and have discussions with families, but families who have children going to school, to actually learn about the challenges facing students, access for education, but also to understand how the families are coping with a situation, including the need of their children. So I ended up interviewing 25 families from various ethnic groups in South Sudan. When I came back, I wrote after I came back, I wrote a report. So I have that document. So if you are interested in reading it, send me an email, and then I will share the report with you. Next. So why education pathway to peace? Why? I just went to the UNICEF website and checked on the status of education in South Sudan. 3 in 5 children are out of school. Sorry, there's something missing. Are out of school. And 1 in 5 children enroll in school, but also dropped out. This is okay. If you look at okay, so the other data is not clear, but if you look at it, there's quite a lot of um, a lot of students who are not going to school in South Sudan. So about 2.8 million children are out of school in South Sudan. Net enrollment is low at 3% for pre-primary and 37% for primary and only 5% for secondary education. There are 606 secondary schools in the whole country, and then about 5,819 primary schools in South Sudan. The demand for education is very high and diverse, but we have challenges of being a country that come out of war for so long. So teachers are paid very, very low, and that they are discouraged to not teach. Next. When I was there in 2019, when I was in northern Uganda, I visited number of refugee camps. Like as I said, not all the children in the refugee camp even do go to schools. I actually saw that young girls, who was coming from the bush with the charcoal, providing them to her family. So even children who have left the country don't have access to education. If you read my report that I have written, in some of the classes you find 200 children, in one class, and I realized they all don't find a place to sit. Some of them standing outside. Next. So one of the schools that I visited at a place called Alera, and I went in to talk to the teachers. They didn't want me to talk to the student, but when I came out with this, and chat with the student, and they have so many things to say about the school, and I don't blame teachers. It is also the lack of resources. All these people at the refugee camps are not provided with basic resources, and so teachers also struggled to meet the need of the student. There are no classes, and there's so many kids at the refugee camp. Next. Recently, I visited East Africa. It was this year, and my goal this time was to go to learn about some of the peace building initiatives in the region, in East Africa, Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan, and Ethiopia, and Eritrea also. I was also interested in wanted to know what is the UNESCO is doing in that region. Something for me to learn from, to be able to continue to do my voluntary work. So I'm interested in UNESCO concept of associated school network. This concept of focusing on education for sustainability, for citizenship, and for intercultural and heritage learning. And goal of that is building peace in the mind of young people, preparing young people to be steward for their environment, but also to promote peace among themselves and in their communities. And I think this is, in my years of advocacy, this is, I think, the way forward. Because if you change the mind of people, you are going to make it. It's going to make it easier for that society to change. When I left my country as a young boy in the 1980s, and we were put in a camp, a military-like camp, with thousands of boys. Some of us, even though we come from South Sudan is very diverse. We didn't understand each other. I remember when we go for military lectures, they will be translating them into different languages, and I just hear only the sound of those languages. I don't know what they were talking about. And when I was in South Sudan, what I used to hear about those communities, some of them were very negative from my own community, talking about them negatively. But when I was there in that hardship, it was a very difficult place. It is in a place where a young person would bury another young person. In my culture, you don't go closer to a burial site if you are a child. But when we were in Ethiopia, we were the people to bury the young one that died among us. And so I changed from there. I learned from there. I saw the value of working with everybody. Some of my best friends who I still remember who helped me a lot during those times were not actually from my village, were people from other ethnic group, people that we come to figure out how to communicate among ourselves when we were there during the military training. So if you change the mind of people, young people, it's going to live with them for their life, and they become agent of peace and good governance. Next. So yeah, part of my visiting to Uganda, I was lucky. David Newman here connected me with the Rotary Peace Center in Makerere. And when I was there, I actually was invited to attend one of their conference where they had students who come from different parts of the world who are taking a certificate at Makerere, coming to present their local initiatives. And it was really good for me because people coming from Myanmar, from China, from South Sudan, from different part of the world, sharing what they are doing in their own communities. And so it was a good opportunity. It was a learning opportunity for me. I spent the whole day there. It was really enriching experience. Next. The tall gentleman there came from Australia, and he was a South Sudanese, and he was talking about a project that he initiated during the COVID. Dealing with the experience of South Sudanese in Australia about how people experience racism and how to overcome racism in their new home. So different projects. Yeah, move on. I also wanted to say again, thank you to David, because when I was in South Sudan, it's very difficult sometimes to meet people, especially people who are working in institutions like UNESCO. It's very difficult, even if you are in a country. David had a friend, someone that he know from Ethiopia, who actually become a friend of mine, and I have his WhatsApp number. And that person from Ethiopia helped me to connect with people in South Sudan, even though I was in South Sudan. So I had the opportunity to meet with the Rotary clubs in South Sudan, but also with the UNESCO. And I had, they welcomed me. I shared my interest in young people education and prepare young people for sustainability and for peace. And they also shared with me what they're doing in South Sudan. And UNESCO in South Sudan is working closely with the government to build institutions to make sure that young people have access to education. Oh yeah, I went back to I came from South Sudan has 64 different ethnic groups. I come from a group called Dinka. I left South Sudan for so long. I never been in a Dinka village for 30 something years. And with this, I had opportunity to go to the village. Even though it's not where I was born, I went to this village because a colleague of mine whom we shared a room when I was in Ethiopia as a young person came from that region. And my own home country, my home village is flooded for the last 4 years because of the climate change. So nobody there. So I ended up going to my friend village, for the first time after 30 something years. So I'm standing there at that structure called Luak in Dinka. This is a place where people put their cattle. It was a good experience for me to be in a Dinka village for 30, after 30 something years. Next. So what did we achieve with the East EPP? When I came back, I went and talked to the Manitoba Council of International Corporations, put in an application with the help of colleagues here, Noel DePap and Jessica, my daughter Dior, and we and a gentleman called Abraham Manabani, and we managed to get 6,000. And when we got the money, we thought of using that money to support education in refugee camp. Among we selected a student from the 24 families that we interviewed in my earlier research. And so we support those students, six girls and one disabled boy, for 2 years. And so it's something great that we have done with the volunteer work that we do here in Manitoba. And we're going to be watching a video that was recorded, I think, about a year ago or so, when these students were going back to school after the COVID-19 disrupted their classes. And the money come from the council, but also David Newman Be the Change funding also allowed us to achieve that, to support those students. And the money was managed by the Solidarity Ministry Africa for Reconciliations, which is based in South Sudan and does a lot of work at the refugee camps. So let's watch the short video from some of the students. No voice.
Unity and mutual understanding among South Sudanese ethnic groups who are divided as a result of civil war. This year, 5 students who come from Shilluk, Nuamadi, and Dinka were awarded 2-year scholarship under the EPP project. This encouraged the young South Sudanese and parents to know and support each other without getting involved in issues that divide their communities.
Ana foya, EPP, miko nyara school fees, kitung bora no petwere.
I'm learning at Dora Blanche International College. I'm very happy for supporting me. And what is making me so happy, Papa paid my school fees for 2 terms. And I'm going to begin school on Monday. Thank you so much. God bless you.
I thank my sponsor for sponsoring me, Dola International College. And I'm very, very, very grateful to be studying here. And I really like this school. Yeah. So thanks. I want to become a doctor. Yeah. Not a nurse, but a doctor. Professional doctor. Yeah. So I hope this will help me. I also hope my parents, I feel so happy because now I, I will be back to school and not even staying at home like because of school fees. That because you really helped me returning me back to school. So without you, maybe I, I, I will have been at home during the second term, but because of you, I will not be at school studying.
So with that little support that we got, we continue to support those girls. One of them has gone back to South Sudan. The one that will say that she wanted to become a doctor, I went to visit the refugee camp this year, and I couldn't find her. The us saying that her mom took her to Kenya. Up to now, we haven't connected with the family, and that is the challenges that come with the supporting girl education in South Sudan. So moving forward, in my mind is to support community. Working with people in the community, supporting local initiatives is the best way, and that for me is using education as a tool to get us there, to make us achieve peace, and but also to create a, a livable community where everybody take care of each other and environment, targeting the youth, but also using that holistic approach. When I was there with the funding that we got from the council, we actually had organized 3 community events, training people on trauma healing, but also encouraging the sense of being one people and acknowledging the challenges that they have, but support each other as a community. Those students were put in one school, and their parents would be coming to visit them. They have the opportunity, even though they're not coming from the same community, they have the opportunity to get to know each other through the education of their children. So in my mind, with this initiative, we'll be recruiting more volunteers. Like I said earlier, that we've been doing this for a long time, and it takes a toll on us too. And partnering with different organizations who are supporting peace. Next. And I want to say thank you again to David for always being there. Ray Silvius from the University of Winnipeg. Manabani, a gentleman from South Sudanese community here who always help the community. Canadian Mennonite University, Manitoba Research Alliance, and my colleagues here in the community, Noel Dipap, Abdi. When I was there, I had opportunity to meet people from the Kampala Rotary in Uganda the first time I went, and then the Ministry, Solidarity Ministry for Africa Reconciliation and Development, who supported the student that we have, so we're supporting in schools, and my place of work, Social Planning Council of Winnipeg. You got to be able to do all this if also where people who work with you understand that you have other role, because you won't be able to get all the time to go and organize conferences in different places. So with the support from the organizations, I am able to find time to do some of this volunteer work. And that is it for me.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful presentation, Reuben. And I think for last 30 minutes or so, we have gone through the ideas of running a volunteer organization, particularly in the sector of advocacy, and what are the challenges you faced. But also, you ended with a lot of hope with regards to a school where female students are being trained. So at this point, we would sort of run a dialogue session. And first, I would like to invite our advisor, David Newman, to come forward. David, floor is yours. Go ahead, sir.
Reuben, thank you so much for a very thoughtful distillation of what you've been doing for the 8 years, more 9 years now, I guess. And I know the struggles of someone who's a parent like you are, with children, a spouse, an important job in our community, and all of this work that you've done is as a volunteer outside of all of that. A vacation for you was a trip to Africa to help others. So you should be on any appreciation list from the community of Winnipeg and the global human family. And I extend thanks to you and all you work with and all that you have involved in both CAS and of course, your educational program. I would like you, if you would, in your own words, just to express for CAS the vision that you mentioned for South Sudan. And I've, as you know, said many times that we in the privilege and prosperity and freedom in a constitutional democracy as diverse as Canada have the space to speak truth, to take time to volunteer, and I'm talking the privileged part of Canada. And then there's people like you who, in the prime of your life and your careers with families, are doing a huge amount of heavy lifting with other members of diaspora groups in North America. So I'm wondering if in the freedom of North America and our privilege here, despite all of your demands on you, what vision have you created with your experience in North America for the future of South Sudan?
I think, David, to me, I am a believer. South Sudanese are the best people. They are very generous. They are very cooperative. I think what is happening in our country is the remnants of the colonials, that the system of governance that was put up, going back to when South Sudan was, or Sudan as a whole was colonized, it wasn't a just system. So when Sudan got independent, we ended up, we have independent, I think, in 1996, but in 1995, we actually, before independence, start the war. Because what happened was that the Egyptian, collaborated with minorities in the Sudan, people of the Arab origin, and then, exploited Islam to govern South Sudan. And that didn't go well with majority of the South Sudanese were not, Sudanese in general. And so it caused a lot. So when South Sudan separated from the Sudan, it became an issue of Darfur. And now the Sudan that the South separated from is bleeding. because the institutions that were put in place were not just. So I do believe that South Sudanese and Sudanese are good people. They just need to overcome the governance things, and I think they will be okay. I do think that people like us who had, we have all kind of experience. We've been displaced as children, and we have gone to the refugee camp. We've been to wars. We have now come and live in Canada, a peaceful country with its own challenges. I think Canada is the place that I have lived the longest in my life, because I left my country as a young person, went to a number of countries as refugees, and then I came here. This is the place that I have lived the longest among all the places that I lived in. And so in my mind, it's going to take people like us really to sacrifice to make sure that we be part of the changes. Yesterday, when we had another peace day, we had a voice of Stephen Moe, who is on the ground doing a lot of work between the Sudan and South Sudan. So I do believe that we will bring changes. Changes will come, and South Sudanese are working together to overcome what is lacking, and for a peaceful country. I want to say one thing that I did not include in my slide, and this is my ultimate goal: is that with volunteers, with people who are supporting my visions of changing the situation in South Sudan through education. I actually, when I visited South Sudan recently, South Sudan, there's a lot of investors in South Sudan. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of people with a lot of money in South Sudan. But there's a lot of people in South Sudan who are really suffering. And I want to introduce this idea of sustainability. I'm thinking that if I had the opportunity, I'm going to build a school with the local materials, not fancy school, but a school with local material, but with education, with a quality education, so that people see the importance of, live locally. And that is my kind of a goal.
I'll give Gary a chance. I'm just loaded with all kinds of questions because I know your deep wisdom and your deep passion. But let me turn it over to Gary and Kauser, and then after they've had their turn, if we got any time left, I'll see if I can chip in some more. But I look forward to a long, continuing relationship with your work, and I'm very appreciative for it, as the whole world should be. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And Reuben, so good to listen to your words. I had the pleasure of last night's event with the Sudanese community as well, that helped set the stage for this today. And you've shown so much strength and resilience in your life. And we'd like you to know that you belong in the context of Winnipeg and Canada, and the work that you're doing with your diaspora connects you, and so you're connected in that way sort of to the whole human family. And you've stressed education in the work that you've done, which is truly important, but to create a successful and sustainable environment, there's other elements. I just wonder, in South Sudan, is the sort of rule of law, like just the actual judicial process, is that fairly secure now and becoming meaningful, or is there trouble in the judicial systems as well?
I personally, this is my own opinions. Personally, I think that we have failed ourselves as South Sudanese when we established the system. Traditionally, the customary laws, some of them have some element that need to be changed, but that's where we should have started, from the grassroots up. But we have missed that. And so the Western-based institutions that we have created are kind of up, and the communities are left alone. And that's where the challenge is, and that's what I said earlier, that we need to really instill in people's mind the idea that what's gonna bring change has to be locally driven. South Sudan is very diverse. You go to every region, there have mechanisms that have been in place for thousands of years that are used for justice. And those ones should be incorporated into the modern justice for it to really reach to the grassroots. We're not doing that now, so we have challenges. But I think, like I said, we're a young country. We just had our independence. I think I missed a slide earlier about the independence of South Sudan. We had our independence in 2011. We're struggling, but I think we're gonna get there soon.
Yeah, so you're the youngest country in the world still, I think.
Yeah.
And so as you say, that you've got lots of room to move. But thinking through the legal system and even journalism and how important it is for being able to create diverse thoughts, ideas, and to move people forward. I hope that that's another area that over time will develop as well.
Yeah,
And
those like you're right. Those things also, like, I think accountability is a big thing, right? Even here in Canada, for example, if there's no accountability, anybody will do what they want. Human being, we need to live socially, holding each other accountable. And so that aspect of accountability also come when you empower the community, the grassroots. So that if I go back and live in my village, I will hold accountable my MP, the person who represent my constituency. That's my role. But if I'm not empowered, I might not even have a voice to question a person who represent me locally. And that's a problem. So I think that empowering people, providing them with educations, making sure that they believe in what they have, that way moving up will be very easy. I think we are finding it for the last 12 years that we've been independent country. We're finding it difficult to move from up down. I think we should be starting to actually move from bottom to up.
thank you. Kauser, maybe in the interest of time, I'll put it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gary. Reuben, I just have a kind of two-folded question here. Very quickly, what do you see the issues pertaining to the framework of rule by the majority versus rule by minority? Particularly, Sudan was split because Sudan was a long time dominated by Arabs living in the north. And so there is a dichotomy here. So I need your comment on that. And secondly, you said that there are a lot of developments going on in South Sudan, and to the best of my knowledge, Chinese companies are working in terms of in the well field and well transportation. So, do you think the development might have some adverse impact in the relationship of intergroup? And this is also connected to my earlier question that will it be a problem at some point in the future when rule by majority, for example, your ethnic group might be, having difficulty in governance? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the people who led the South Sudan independent, late Dr. John Garang, has a very popular quote that is still, he died, few weeks after he became, the vice president, but he had so many wisdom. One of his talks that is still very used widely by South Sudanese is the idea that he was saying that Arabism will not unite us, Islam will not unite us, Dinkaism will not unite us, any other thing will not unite us, but Sudanism will unite us. That was his word. That if we practice something that favored a particular group of people, then we know we are doomed. We got to make sure that we're working for the interests of all people. So like what we are seeing now in the Sudan, what is happening now in the Sudan, a lot of them are not seen on the news. it is disheartening to see Sudanese suffering the way they are suffering. After South Sudan has separated, because there's no justice, quite a number of Sudanese, felt that they're marginalized, and they rise up, and we are seeing what we are witnessing today in the Sudan. So you're right. It doesn't matter. It's not a Sudan thing. It's anywhere. If South Sudanese, especially my ethnic group, don't look at that and see that South Sudan is for all 46, 64 different ethnic groups. It's not for a Dinka. And I think if good governance is not put in place, the majority also suffer. If you go to South Sudan now, a lot of the Dinkas are suffering like any other South Sudanese. The only good thing is a rule of law that protect each and every South Sudanese. That's what needs to happen in the country. If not, then the situation in the Sudan could also be a situation in South Sudan.
Thank you for your comment. David, please go ahead, sir.
Okay, very big question. Carter's opened the door to the economy issue. South Sudan, of course, is very oil dependent. It's a resource-based economy. And what is being done in terms of developing from the grassroots up an entrepreneurial, male, female, multi-tribal economic base, which will ensure sustainability practices in agriculture and in business, and again, as a model based on the culture of the peoples of South Sudan.
Give me a minute. I'm just taking a charger here. My computer is dying. I hear what you're saying. I think up to this point, all of us in the country understood now that we have a problem. We have a problem of depending on oil. I'll go back again to, late Reuben Garang. He had this say before we had independence, that if we have the independence of South Sudan and it started mining the oil, then we will have a problem. His vision was that we start with agriculture, and after we have, provided food to ourselves, we could mine our resources, natural resources that we have on the ground. We haven't done that, and I think we have problems. I am an environmentalist. My first degree was a science, and a lot of problem in the country now is when it comes to mining, and we know this is a reality. Like, Chinese companies are difficult to be held accountable because you can't do that back home, and so they'll do what they want, and so there's a lot of crisis when it comes to environment in South Sudan, and we're struggling to build roads. Hopefully that will. South Sudan is very rich. Like if you go to some part of South Sudan, especially in the equatorial region, you find a lot of fruits that are just rotting. While you go to other part of South Sudan, you find people suffering, don't have access to fruits or vegetables, something like that, because there's no roads. So like I said earlier, we have challenges in relation to building a grassroots economy. We also have a problem with the rule of law, governance. Those are our challenges, and I think up to this point, most South Sudanese do understand that this is where we need to focus for us to get ourselves to a better place.
Thank you so much.
That you've connected with Rotary International through its grassroots presence in East Africa and also UNESCO. And since you went to East Africa, just this past year. Some amazing things have happened. The United States of America has rejoined UNESCO. And almost concurrently with that, a secular NGO has formed globally called the Global Campaign for Peace Education. So you've made the connections with UNESCO, the Associated Schools Network Project. You made connection with Rotary. Rotary can provide through even major scaled up grants the funding of education. And a person like Dr. Kauser Ahmed, who's hosting, and the Conflict Research and Resilience Institute, and friends and Rotarians in Bangladesh have done things for education in refugee camps, the stateless peoples camps in Bangladesh for the Rohingya peoples. So there's many examples, and I'm looking forward to you with your diaspora groups in North America, utilizing the resources of Rotary and the members of Rotary and the friends of Rotary to assist you in the major challenges you've identified in South Sudan. And you've indicated the traditional justice system imposed in South Sudan and other parts of East Africa is something that the British and the French did to Canada too. And all of us in the world who I think have a belief that the global human family has to be appreciated without borders, getting in the way of equality and inclusion and equity, have identified that restorative justice systems, which go back pre-colonial times, are not just a better way for South Sudan, but a better way for the whole world. So it's a very exciting time. Canada went through its own pains of growing when it was formed as a new country in 1867. And of course, we then became colonizers of our Indigenous peoples. Now the Indigenous peoples are teaching us in Canada the kinds of values and methodologies their culture had formed over thousands of years. So I think there's so much compatibility across borders amongst the peoples who are have been the survivors of arrogance and ignorance, and I think as more and more people in the world in privilege become educated about what the root causes are of the situation in a country like Canada, but more so in a country like South Sudan, I think that there's great hope, and we'll be by your side as you move forward.
Thank you. There's a writer by name Paulo Perry, who I can't pronounce his last name, right, but have written a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Yeah, well aware.
And
Paulo Freire.
yeah, and when I go and read it, so for us, we're witnessing something that is happening that has been indicated in that book. Most of our leaders today liberated South Sudan. They had good intentions of freeing us, but that aspect of, someone who liberated themselves wanted to become like their oppressors is still the issue in South Sudan. And so, I grew up in a village as before I left South Sudan. And I remember very well what I know in my village used to be a common thing in many South Sudanese villages, that if you are in a position of power, you don't control people. You are there as someone who is there to serve people. You are not imposing things on people. In those villages, where I was raised, There was no police. And you could travel the whole night and nobody will touch you. And the leader is somebody who respects the people the most, is the leader. You know, why is it changing now with the current system of the governance? It's because people see this governance system as a foreign to them. And it is anchored on what they had witnessed from the previous oppressors. So if I become the chief of the police, I am going to act like the same way that the chief of the police would, from the Sudan, or the commissioner from the British who controlled villages, who had no interest at all in them, but controlling them. And now a commissioner today in South Sudan want to do the same thing that a commissioner from British used to do a long time ago. That's not acceptable. And this is what we are experiencing. And so it's going to take people to speak up. There was a news yesterday, just recently in South Sudan, a deputy mayor went to the market. And when he was there, I don't know what he was doing, he slapped a woman in a market. And it was recorded on social media. And then the outrage from the community, asking the authority to remove him from the leadership, and he was fired. This is what needs to happen. The leaders still have that mindset. I am the police. I could take the funding. Nobody will question me. I could throw somebody in jail if they disagree with me. That was not a tradition. That was never been a tradition. So where did they get it from? Never been a tradition. Nothing like that in the villages. Even today, if you go deep in the village in South Sudan, those practices are not acceptable. But if you go to town, it's a different thing. And these are the same people. What happened? They still, doing things the same way that the colonials were doing things to the people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it was a fascinating discussion. I think we could go on listening to Reuben for hours, as David just mentioned that these are some of the very interesting and poignant questions asked by both the advisors. But for the sake of time, we would like to close the session with some of the sobering thoughts that Mr. Reuben brought forward. And I think through our social media platforms and also Peacedays platform, we listened to him. We listened to the struggles of the newly emerged countries, one of the youngest countries in our United Nations system and in the world. And yesterday I was talking to Honorable Senator Mary Lou McFadden on a different occasion, and she definitely echoed some of the things that Mr. Reuben said today. And we'll share the interview very shortly in our platforms. So please keep an eye. So with this, thank you so much, Mr. Reuben, for coming in. And I'm sure your insights will remain in perpetuity in our platforms. And people of South Sudan and diaspora would definitely take a lot of considerations from your points. And I think it is important to listen to what you said, and especially the education piece. And our organization is also working very hard to provide education to female children. And we are very much actually grateful to MCIC for funding us in trying our ideas. And this is what need to be, and I'm sure you have also received funding from MCIC. So it is really interesting and important to mention here. So the audience, we would like to thank all of you for being with us for last 1 hour and 20 minutes in our clock. And we are going to request you to kindly follow us, both Peacedays and Creek. We are going to host a number of sessions, and Peacedays itself has a series of events. Please check their website, peacedays.ca, and try to join and inspire people like Reuben, who is working voluntarily for the last 8 years. And through your participation, through your comments or sharing of videos in our platforms, Mr. Reuben and I, and the volunteers, as you see, both our advisors, we all will be inspired and we'll keep our spirit up in working for the common good of people. Thank you so much once again, especially our audience. Please do subscribe Creek's YouTube channel so that you can listen and hear the moment we hear some of the fascinating speakers we are going to host in the next couple of days. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.